Yet the story of Napoleon Bonaparte challenges this idea in a dramatic way. When his coffin was opened in 1840, nearly 20 years after his death, those present were astonished. His body was not reduced to bones, as many expected.
Historians claim Napoleon Bonaparte died quietly in exile. However, the moment his airtight coffin was cracked open, the entire scenario left everyone utterly speechless. What they uncovered inside that coffin created a shocking mystery that triggered terrifying questions. Did the British military secretly switch the body, or was it a political cover-up story? Stay tuned to find out. Before we uncover the chilling secrets hidden deep inside that tomb, we must first look at the incredibly eerie, lonely way Napoleon's life came to an end. The solitary end on St. Helena. Not long before his exile, Napoleon Bonaparte was the most powerful man alive, a ruler who reshaped entire nations with a single word. Then, in the blink of an eye, he lost absolutely everything. After his crushing defeat at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, the former French emperor was stripped of his royal crown and treated like a dangerous global criminal. Because the British military wanted him gone forever, they dragged him to St. Helena, a jagged, windswept volcanic rock stranded in the lonely waters of the South Atlantic Ocean. You see, this place was not just a regular island. It was intentionally designed to be an inescapable natural supermax prison and was heavily guarded by British naval warships and 2,000 soldiers, making escape functionally impossible. For 5 painful years, the former master of Europe rotted away inside a miserable, decaying estate called Longwood House. The home was constantly damp, freezing, with mold and severe rat infestations. Napoleon spent his final days suffering from agonizing stomach pain, severe vomiting, and a rapidly fading mind. He lived out his remaining time under the harsh, constant watch of his strict British jailer, Sir Hudson Lowe. It was a truly humiliating fall from grace for a celebrity general who once controlled the destiny of millions. Then, on May 5, 1821, at just 51 years old, Napoleon took his very last breath. Even on his deathbed, he was still thinking like an emperor. In his final written testament, he left a powerful, dramatic request that shook French politics to its core. In his words, "I wish that my ashes rest on the banks of the Seine among the French people whom I have loved so much." However, the British government flatly refused his last wish. They were absolutely terrified that bringing his body back to Europe would spark a massive new revolution and instantly rally his old followers. Instead, his burial on the island was treated with great military respect and solemnity, rather than being completely unceremonious. Also, to prevent any loyalist rescue missions, they sealed Napoleon inside 3 nested coffins made of tin, lead, and mahogany, locking them beneath giant stone slabs. But while the British military believed they had permanently locked away the specter of the French Empire beneath the heavy soil of St. Helena, they had no idea that something miraculous, or rather terrifying, was altering the body in the dark, setting the stage for a mind-bending reveal 2 decades later. The audacious political plot. After Napoleon was buried, 19 years passed before anyone disturbed that island grave, and by 1840, the political climate in France was reaching a dangerous boiling point. The reigning monarch, King Louis-Philippe I, and his Prime Minister, Adolphe Thiers, were facing massive protests from deeply unhappy citizens. So to save their failing reputation, they came up with an incredibly bold plan. They decided to tap into the country's deep nostalgia for their former leader. By doing so, the politicians believed that if they brought Napoleon back home, they could use his legendary memory to unite the angry citizens and make the current government look heroic. Now, this scheme required an unbelievable diplomatic gamble. France had decided to officially ask Great Britain, their historic enemy, to give the body back. And to the absolute shock of diplomats across Europe, British Foreign Minister Lord Palmerston agreed to the request. The British saw this gesture as an effective way to build a stronger peace alliance with France. With the paperwork signed, the French government immediately prepared for an unprecedented mission known as Retour des Cendres, translated as the Return of the Ashes. To lead this high-stakes expedition, the king chose his own son, the Prince of Joinville. they boarded a massive French warship named La Belle Poule, which workers had carefully painted solid black as a sign of deep national mourning. A handful of Napoleon's aging, loyal servants also joined the crew to help identify their former boss. As the black ship sailed across the Atlantic towards St. Helena, an intense feeling of dread filled the vessel. The crew spent weeks stressing over what they would find inside the tomb. After nearly 2 decades in a hot, damp environment, many men were terrified that opening the vault would only reveal a horrific mess of unidentifiable, liquefied remains. To prevent any future conspiracy theories, both nations created strict security protocols for the upcoming exhumation. They needed absolute proof that the body truly belonged to Napoleon, so political rivals could never claim the event was a hoax, because every single detail had to be legally verified. And on the storm-swept night of October 14th, 1840, under the flickering glare of lanterns, the excavation team finally broke through the surface of the valley grave. The workers were completely unprepared for the grueling mechanical battle required to cut through the structural concrete, and they had no idea of the physical anomaly waiting for them beneath the stone. Midnight at the Valley of the Tomb. The clocks struck midnight on October 15th, 1840, when the heavy work finally began. British Royal Engineers and French soldiers stood side by side in the pitch black, dealing with a sudden torrential downpour that soaked the entire valley. The freezing rain and howling wind made the graveyard feel incredibly eerie as lanterns flickered in the dark. The men grabbed their shovels and picks, digging away at the muddy earth with a sense of nervous urgency. Every person present knew they were digging up a man who had completely turned the world upside down. Although the crew expected a tough job, they never anticipated the brutal mechanical battle that followed. The British military had built an incredibly tough fortress around the body 19 years earlier. The workers encountered intense resistance almost immediately as they hit the outermost security layers. For over 9 exhausting hours, the men had to use heavy tools to break through thick brickwork, giant solid stone blocks, and reinforced concrete. The physical toll was massive, and the continuous sound of metal striking stone echoed through the valley all night long. By roughly 9 a.m. the next morning, the sun finally came up, and the stubborn underground vault gave way. The workers cleared the last of the debris and exposed a massive mahogany casket, which was the first of the nested layers. A specialized team rigged a system of heavy pulleys to carefully hoist the giant wooden box out of the deep mud. They carried the heavy load across the grass into a secure, white canvas tent that had been set up nearby, specifically for medical evaluation. Inside the quiet tent, engineers went to work with meticulous care to peel back the layers of time. They carefully unscrewed the mahogany exterior, exposing a heavy second coffin made entirely of lead. Using custom metal shears, the workers sliced through the thick lead sheet, revealing the third and final container, which was a tin casket. This final box was completely airtight and soldered shut, meaning the interior environment had remained entirely undisturbed since the day of the funeral. A heavy, breathless silence fell over the room as the lead surgeon stepped forward with his tools to break the final tin seal. The emotional tension inside the tent reached a breaking point. Several elderly veterans who had actually fought alongside Napoleon covered their faces, bracing themselves for the horrific smell of death. When the final tin barrier was breached and a delicate white satin shroud was slowly peeled back by the surgeon, a collective gasp echoed through the tent because what lay before their eyes completely defied the known laws of human biology. The shocking sight inside the sealed coffins. Instead of finding a crumbling skeleton after 19 long years underground, the witnesses looked down at a man who appeared to be merely sleeping. Napoleon's iconic face was perfectly recognizable. His skin still possessed a remarkably elastic quality, and his cheeks remained quite full. He was dressed in his signature green uniform of the chasseur à cheval, which showed absolutely no signs of decay or mold. His leather boots were still highly polished, his gold epaulets gleamed under the bright tent lanterns, and his legendary bicorn hat rested neatly across his thighs. The expensive clothing had completely preserved the vibrant colors of his empire, making it look as though he had been laid to rest only the previous afternoon. Looking closer at the remains, the doctors and onlookers noticed some incredibly strange details that seemed to defy death itself. A distinct bluish-gray shadow covered his jawline, showing that his beard had actually experienced a tiny amount of growth after he stopped breathing. His fingernails were still firmly attached to his fingers and had grown notably long inside the dark vault. Napoleon's hands, which were famous during his lifetime for their soft, elegant shape, were completely unblemished. The official medical logs described them as singularly well preserved, maintaining a flexible, lifelike texture that shocked everyone. Louis Marchand, Napoleon's fiercely loyal first valet, who had been by his side during his agonizing final days in 1821, was present at the 1840 exhumation. Eyewitness accounts and diaries confirm that Marchand was deeply overcome with emotion and wept openly upon seeing the face of his emperor perfectly intact after nearly 2 decades. As everyone observed, the lead surgeon, Dr. Remy Guillard, knew this surprising sight could not last. He grew deeply concerned that sudden exposure to the humid open air would trigger an immediate catastrophic chemical reaction. If left open for too long, the oxygen would cause the pristine flesh to rapidly decompose and melt into dust before their eyes. Because of this massive danger, he started a strict countdown, limiting the entire visual inspection to exactly 120 seconds. The workers moved quickly, and the heavy coffin lid was swung back into place and permanently resealed to protect the body for the long journey back to France. The unbelievable state of Napoleon's body sent shockwaves through 19th century science, instantly fueling a dark alternative theory. Had the emperor's body been saved by a miracle of nature, or was his pristine corpse the definitive proof of a cold-blooded death? The arsenic conspiracy, poison or preservative? The mystery behind Napoleon's perfectly preserved body immediately caught the attention of forensic toxicologists around the world. You see, scientists have long known that arsenic is one of the most effective antimicrobial agents in existence. The chemical functions by completely destroying the microscopic bacteria necessary for human decomposition, which can trigger an unusual biological process known as spontaneous mummification. This physical reality suggested that the pristine condition of the emperor's flesh was not a supernatural miracle. Instead, it was likely the lasting chemical footprint of a highly toxic substance hiding inside his cellular tissues for decades after his death. Immediately, investigators started searching for where this chemical could have come from, and they uncovered a strange environmental culprit inside his final home. The damp, rodent-infested rooms of Longwood House were covered in a cheap pigment called Sheely's green wallpaper. This specific wall paint contained massive amounts of copper arsenite. Whenever the heavy coastal air made the rooms humid, a creeping room fungus reacted with the green dye to release invisible, highly toxic vapors directly into the living spaces. This literally made Napoleon breathe these poisoned fumes every single day during his confinement. Also, decades after the vault opening, modern researchers used advanced nuclear activation analysis inside a specialized atomic reactor to test historic locks of the emperor's hair, and results were astonishing, confirming arsenic levels up to 100 times higher than the natural human average today. This data breathed new life into a popular assassination narrative involving his inner circle. The theory claimed that a rogue French aristocrat named Count Charles de Montholon, who secretly worked with the British, had systematically poisoned Napoleon by lacing his daily wine rations to eliminate him slowly without leaving obvious clues for doctors. However, modern medical professionals strongly dispute the death plot using direct historical evidence. They point back to the highly detailed 1821 autopsy report, which clearly confirmed that Napoleon passed away from a severe, advanced case of stomach cancer caused by a perforating gastric ulcer. This clinical diagnosis perfectly matched the exact medical condition that killed his own father years before. Furthermore, a comprehensive 2008 study conducted by nuclear physicists proved that Napoleon's hair contained massive arsenic levels since his childhood in Corsica. During the 19th century, the toxic chemical was ubiquitous across Europe, used routinely in common hair tonics, military ammunition manufacturing, and household wood finishes, meaning his exposure was entirely accidental. While chemical forensics managed to explain the physical preservation of his flesh, it simultaneously opened the door to a much more macabre, unsettling discovery regarding the contents buried inside the coffin. The macabre mysteries of the missing anatomy. To understand the bizarre contents of the coffin, we have to look closely at the chaotic autopsy performed on the island back in 1821. Now, immediately after Napoleon passed away, a tense group of British and French medical professionals gathered around his body to perform a post-mortem examination. They carefully dissected the former emperor, completely removing his heart and stomach. The doctors preserved these vital organs inside separate silver vessels filled with heavy industrial alcohol. Unfortunately, before he died, Napoleon had explicitly begged for his heart to be sent across the ocean to his estranged wife, Marie-Louise. However, the British governor, Sir Hudson Lowe, vetoed this emotional request out of pure political spite. He forced the medical team to cram the heavy silver jars right inside the coffin, jamming them directly between Napoleon's legs before sealing the vault. This strange handling of his remains was only the beginning of a much more shocking rumor. During the confusion of that crowded autopsy room, an opportunistic Corsican priest named Abbé Vignali allegedly did something unthinkable. According to historical legend, Antomarchi stealthily severed Napoleon's penis and took it to Ange Paul Vignali, the priest who brought it back to Corsica, along with other effects from St. Helena. This missing anatomical relic spent decades floating through the shady global market of elite European private collections. The strange artifact eventually surfaced in the public eye when a prominent American urologist purchased it at an auction in 1977. It remains one of the most eccentric, dark footnotes in modern historical collecting, leaving experts to wonder exactly what else was tampered with on that fateful day. The true chaos erupted when 19th century researchers began carefully comparing the official notes from the original 1821 burial with the measurements taken during the 1840 exhumation. Historians quickly uncovered glaring inconsistencies in Napoleon's recorded physical height. The paperwork from his deathbed did not seem to match the actual dimensions of the body lifted from the mud. Much of this confusion stemmed from a massive misunderstanding between the French and British measurement systems, as a French inch was actually longer than a British inch. The general public did not understand this technical math error at the time. The sudden realization that the numbers were completely mismatched triggered an instant wave of paranoia across mainland France. These lingering anatomical anomalies and shifting measurements birthed a terrifying whisper campaign throughout the streets of Paris. Citizens began demanding to know if their iconic leader's final resting place had been completely compromised. Did the Prince of Joinville actually bring back the true Emperor of France? Or did they inadvertently exhume a common British servant? The modern enigma and the secrets of Les Invalides. Well, this haunting question triggered a wild body double theory that still circulates among revisionist researchers today. Some historians argue that the British government was absolutely terrified that an independent French autopsy would eventually prove they had secretly poisoned the emperor during his captivity. To hide this international crime, they allegedly dug up Napoleon's body years before the official exhumation and replaced it with his butler, a man named Jean-Baptiste Cipriani, who had passed away on the island in 1818 and bore a striking physical resemblance to the emperor. Another radical theory claims that Napoleon's actual remains were secretly smuggled across the English Channel and buried deep beneath the floorboards of Westminster Abbey as the ultimate hidden British war trophy, leaving the French with a completely empty prize. To clear up the ongoing confusion, molecular anthropologists eventually turned to advanced genetics to find the ultimate truth. Scientists successfully mapped the mitochondrial DNA from authenticated locks of hair belonging to the Bonaparte family across generations. They discovered a hyper-rare genetic mutation that was shared exclusively by Napoleon, his mother Letizia, and his sister Caroline, providing a genetic fingerprint that could settle the debate instantly. Yet, despite intense pressure from historical preservation groups to run a definitive DNA swap on the actual corpse inside the tomb, the French Ministry of Defense and the curators of the Army Museum steadfastly refuse to allow the vault to be opened, keeping the final truth permanently locked away from the modern world. Because of this permanent refusal, the final resting place remains a magnificent enigma. Today, the body rests in Paris inside a massive, imposing red quartzite sarcophagus designed by the famous architect Louis Visconti, which took over 20 years to fully complete. This heavy monument sits inside a beautiful open circular crypt directly beneath the towering golden dome of l'Hôtel des Invalides, where millions of global tourists pay their respects each year. While the conspiracy theories are fascinating, the overwhelming convergence of physical evidence, detailed dental records, and verified military uniform insignias proves that the legendary military genius who once held the world in his hands does rest in Paris, forever immortalized in both flesh and folklore. What do you believe? Do you think Napoleon was assassinated, or did environmental factors naturally preserve his body? Let us know what you think in the comments. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. For more content like this, tap on the next video on your screen.